When a retired bank manager is found dead inside a museum gallery, everyone calls it a heart attack. 21 years later, a single photo file and a faint whisper on an old 911 recording suggest otherwise. Cold case investigator Bennett Crowe is called in to uncover the truth behind the woman in Gallery 4, a death that looks ordinary but hides the kind of secret that can ruin reputations, careers, and legacies. A modern detective story told in 10 chapters, where technology meets intuition and silence leaves the loudest clue. A Quiet Transaction, a Bennett Crowe mystery by 10 Chapters Studio. Chapter 1, The Woman in Gallery 4. The email from the Cold Case Review Unit was half plea, half dare. Subject: 2004 death at the Whitlock Museum. New info surfaced. The Whitlock is one of those downtown institutions that looks like money and calls it culture. Corniced stone, a donor wall in brushed brass, portraits of benefactors who would never stand in the rain for a bus. Marion Keller died there 21 years ago, age 58, former bank manager, grandparent in training, volunteer docent most Saturdays. She was found on a Sunday morning in Gallery 4, the museum's old coin and currency room, fitting if you enjoy that kind of irony. Sitting on a bench beneath an oil of a 19th century banker who smirked like he knew the future. The lights were out from an overnight transformer failure. The guard's flashlight made her face pale as wax. The coroner wrote myocardial infarction. The detective wrote no signs of struggle. The museum wrote a tasteful note to the paper. And then it sat. Because death that looks natural is a filing habit, and habits are hard to quit. I took the case because the unit's note had one attachment, a photograph. Not of Marion, a shot of Gallery 4 during a donor event 2 nights earlier. Glass cases polished, corks in silver coolers, clustered smiles. The camera had kept its mouth shut for 20 years. The photo itself, fine. The data behind it, more interesting. A volunteer digitized old museum CDs and ran everything through a modern asset manager. The software flagged that the EXIF date on the file didn't match the CD index. Small inconsistency to most. To me, a cough in a quiet room. I drank cold coffee, loaded the file, and read the metadata line by line. The camera was a Canon PowerShot S40, a workhorse 20 years ago. Timestamp: Friday, May 7th, 2004, 9:44 p.m. Exposure: 1/60th. Flash fired. Nothing unusual until the GPS tag, which should not exist. That model didn't have GPS. But the asset software had done something clever. It associated the museum's Wi-Fi SSID, archived from the event vendor's logs, with the geolocation database during ingest. Approximate latitude-longitude stamped on import. Good enough for ad tech, good enough for me. The more delicious bit sat in the IPTC caption block. Quote, Coins Gala, Vault Door Demo. Vault Door. I called Detective Ruiz from the unit. You said new info. This it? And 911 call from that Sunday, Ruiz said. Someone used the payphone across the street at 8:11 a.m. Anonymous male voice. There's a woman down in the museum. I think she's not breathing. Our responding guard claims he found her at 8:23 a.m. He didn't make the call, says he didn't see anyone when he arrived. I said, Payphone in 2004 doesn't narrow the field. Whose vault door demo? The museum director at the time, Avery Helston, retired to Florida, occasionally returns to remind everyone he once raised money. We've also got a security supervisor with gambling debt who begged HR not to cut his hours. A curator passed over for promotion, and Marion's daughter, Erin, who reportedly resented Mom's second life at the museum. I said 4 classic flavors: sweet, salty, bitter, and broke.
I limped, old story, no questions, in through the Whitlock's staff entrance on a gray afternoon that threatened rain and behaved exactly as predicted. The present director, a woman named Naomi Price, met me with the careful smile of someone used to keeping donors and disasters on separate calendars. "We've already been through this death," she said as we crossed the atrium. "Reopening it won't change museum history." I said, "Reopening cases changes other kinds of history. Show me Gallery 4. The coin room smelled faintly of old paper and lemon oil. Ranks of glass vitrines held minted faces and defunct promises, currencies that died politely. In the corner sat the relic the donors loved, a decommissioned vault door from a 19th century bank branch. It had that ridiculous star wheel handle and the heavy theater of security. I touched the rim. Grease, cleaned often but not always well, lived in the seams. "Was it functional?" I asked. She said it never locked anything in this building, just a prop. At events, Helston loved to say, "Welcome to the vault," before unveiling some acquisition. He installed it himself, technically against our conservator's advice. "And the night before Marion died? A demonstration?" Price's mouth tightened a millimeter. "Donor entertainment. He had the lighting crew dim the room and bring up a spotlight on the wheel. People love spectacle with their tax deductions." "Where would Helston have stored the tools?" I asked. "We have an equipment cage. It's been reorganized 10 times since." I bent over the bench where Marion sat her last. The vinyl had been replaced, but the bolts anchoring it to the floor wore tiny crescents where a wrench had bitten. Years of maintenance leaving their teeth marks. Above, the banker's portrait had a slight tilt that a level wouldn't forgive. Lights failed that night. A transformer down the block. The alarms? They went to battery and stayed armed. That's in the report. I nodded. Alarms stay armed, but interior motion sensors sleep if the system expects movement. Cleaning staff, special events, approved schedules. Museums teach you how to steal with their policies. Let me see Marion's volunteer file and your staffing rosters that weekend. Price led me to a records room that looked like a long argument between paper and the cloud. We found Marion's file, neat handwriting where it mattered, the rest typed by some long-ago coordinator. She took Saturday afternoon shifts. She liked Gallery 4. She'd been a bank manager for 32 years before retiring. Her references used words like reliable and steady. It read like a person who made deposits of trust and withdrawals of silence. I asked for the guard logs for that weekend. There it was. Security Supervisor, M. Russo. Guard on duty Sunday morning, D. Podhi. The schedule margins held a note. Door 3 magnet intermittent. Use manual. Door magnets tell the system if a door is closed. Intermittent is a thief's lullaby. I asked, did Helston sign out equipment Friday? Price pulled the clipboard from a drawer with the resigned grimace of someone who knows clipboards keep secrets longer than people. Yes, lighting kit, a pry bar, odd, and 2 furniture sliders. Why would he... to move something heavy without scarring the floor, I said. I looked back towards Gallery 4 through the glass. The vault doors stood serene, theatrical as always, its base sitting on 4 discrete nickel pucks. Furniture sliders.
When I left, rain had finally committed. I crossed to the payphone Ruiz mentioned. Its booth was gone. Only a rust ghost and the outline of anchors remained on the concrete. I pulled up a Street View time capsule from 2009 on my phone. There it was, a glass cube with a crown logo, still standing then. Behind it, in the old image, a white van with the museum's logo. Rear doors shut. I pinched and zoomed until pixels surrendered nothing else. The newer part of the case sat back at my office in a cardboard banker's box Ruiz had sent over. The 911 tape, old guard statements, the coroner's report, and a fresh USB stick that held the digitized donor gallery photos. I queued the 911 call and ran it through a modern separation model, not for music this time, but for voices and environmental sound. The program teased components apart like a patient librarian. Among the low hiss and public space reverb was a whisper that didn't belong, not in the call, under it, like the caller had the phone tucked between cheek and shoulder and thought he was alone. A single word, almost a breath. Sorry. Everyone's sorry in the end. The trick is making them explain the beginning. I wrote 3 names on a legal pad: Avery Helston, Marco Russo, Aaron Keller. Then I added a 4th I didn't want yet: Dr. Naomi Price. Anyone standing at the end of a story deserves a page in the beginning. Outside, the rain slackened. In Gallery 4, a woman had died quietly while a city slept, and a vault door made a room feel safe. Safety is the prettiest lie money buys. I put on old jazz, turned the volume down low, and started reading the past like it owed me interest. End of Chapter 1.
Chapter 2. The Director's Party. The problem with museums isn't what they hide, it's what they pretend to display. Avery Helston's villa sat 3,000 kilometers and 1 tax shelter away from the Whitlock. His address had a golf course view and a gate camera that clicked twice before his voice came through the intercom, buttered with retirement charm. "Mr. Crowe, the detective from up north," he said, stretching the title like taffy. "I'll buzz you in. Forgive the humidity. Florida can't help itself." Helston greeted me in linen, all smile and suntan, the kind of man who turned charm into a financial instrument. His handshake was quick, confident, practiced. A small gold museum pin still gleamed on his lapel. He hadn't left the past as cleanly as he liked to think he did. "You're digging up Marion Keller's old case," he said, leading me through to a veranda the size of a small county. "Tragic, really, but I can't imagine there's much left to find." "There's always something left," I said, "especially when someone took care to leave it buried." He poured lemonade from a crystal pitcher and motioned to the chair opposite. Behind him, the Gulf shimmered like expensive wallpaper. "You were involved in the initial investigation," I began. "The gala was your idea. The coins, the vault door demonstration. You liked theater." "Donors liked theater," he corrected smoothly. "We gave them a show, and they gave us checks. It's the oldest exchange in civilization. And that night you were personally supervising the setup." He smiled. "I oversaw the presentation. Lighting, timing, all that. I left around 11. "Funny," I said. "A metadata analysis of a photo taken that night places you in Gallery 4 at 11:57 p.m. Helston's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Metadata. My, you people will chase ghosts anywhere. That must be an error." "The file came from your assistant's camera, and the camera's clock was synced to the event software." For a moment, the charm slipped. Then he recovered, offering a polite chuckle. "Perhaps I stopped back in for a last check. I was meticulous about security." "Security," I repeated. "You also signed out a lighting kit, a pry bar, and furniture sliders. Maintenance needed them. We were repositioning the vault door for the next exhibit. It was heavy, you know. Marion may have helped. She liked feeling useful. She wasn't scheduled to volunteer that Friday. That one landed. His throat moved as he swallowed, but his voice stayed calm. She lived close by, likely stopped in out of habit. Old docents can't stay away. Did she ever mention seeing anything unusual that week? Not to me, he said, tone cooling. If you're implying negligence, you'd better have proof.
I'm implying opportunity, I said. She died 2 days later in your gallery, under your prized vault door. Coincidence is rarely that tidy. Helston's eyes hardened. You have a talent for melodrama, Mr. Crowe. Marion Keller died of natural causes. I read the report myself. I have the same report, I said, standing, and I also have an unfiled addendum. Possible external compression prior to cardiac event. Means someone grabbed her, held her down, or frightened her enough that her heart did the rest. He laughed, short and dry. People die, detective, especially people her age. They do, but they don't always die surrounded by people with reasons to wish them quiet. I set my glass down and took one last look around. On his bookshelf, trophies of a life spent curating admiration, plaques, photos, and a framed article, Whitlock Director Expands Collection Through Bold Acquisitions. In the center, Helston beside the vault door, hand on the wheel like a proud engineer. The EXIF data I'd already seen said the photo was taken at 11:57 p.m., long after guests were gone. Outside, the Florida air pressed heavy and salt-sweet. In the car, I opened my laptop and dug through mirrored archives from a museum grant database. Buried in an old IT backup, I found a PDA sync log labeled Helston_sync 050804, timestamped 0014 hours, the same night as the gala. The note read only, transfer cleared, lockdown tomorrow. Not the kind of thing you write after serving lemonade to donors. I called Detective Ruiz on speaker. He's lying about when he left the museum and about what he moved, I said. You think it's theft? Ruiz asked. Closer to fraud, I said. He wasn't stealing from the museum. He was moving something to make an illegal donation look legitimate. Marion probably saw it. Why call it a transfer? Because in museums, money moves through objects. Shift a coin here, a ledger entry there, and you've just cleaned $1 million. Ruiz exhaled. And she found out, I said. Or she asked the wrong question. Either way, she ended up in Gallery 4 with a bad heart and a good conscience. I closed the laptop, the sound sharp in the quiet car. Outside, the sky had turned the color of old copper. I stared at my reflection in the windshield and thought of Marion Keller, a woman who'd spent her life guarding other people's money, dying inside a room built to display it. Next step? Ruiz asked. The guard with debts. If Helston moved something that night, someone had to keep the alarms quiet, and Marco Russo was paid to look the other way. The rain started again, soft as static. I turned the key and drove back toward the airport. Some men bury truth under paperwork, others under vault doors. End of Chapter 2.
Chapter 3. The Guard with Debt. Marco Russo answered the door in the kind of T-shirt that had forgotten its color. His eyes were sharp, but cautious, the look of a man who'd learned to read intentions faster than sentences. "You're early," he said, voice graveled from years of night shifts and nicotine. "Detective, right? Or whatever you call yourself now." "Investigator," I said. "Still work nights?" "Not at the museum. Not anywhere steady. You want to talk about 20 years ago?" He let me in without waiting for confirmation. The apartment smelled like coffee and worry. Stacks of unopened mail leaned against a dead plant. He gestured to a chair that looked like it had given up resisting gravity. "I told the cops everything. Marion Keller died of a heart attack." "That's what they said." "That's what Helston said," I corrected. "And you took his word for it?" Russo's jaw tightened. You weren't there. No, I said, but the logs were, and the alarms. He looked at me then, really looked. You pulled the alarm data? I pulled everything, and found something curious. A 12-minute blind spot in the motion sensors around Gallery 4. The system called it a magnet interruption. Door 3, to be exact. His silence told me I'd hit the right door. That night, I continued, you were the supervisor. You authorized the manual override. He rubbed his face, the stubble rasping like sandpaper. It was nothing. Maintenance issue. Helston told me the system kept tripping during setup. He said disable it till morning. And you didn't question that? You don't question the director when you're already on probation. My wife was pregnant. I was behind on rent. Helston said he'd take care of me if I kept things smooth for the gala. I thought he meant a bonus, not covering a death. Russo's voice dropped. You think I knew what was happening? Hell no. I got there Sunday morning. The guard on duty, Podhi, called me in a panic. Said there was a woman down in the coin room. We waited for the cops, did what we were told. But later, Helston told me to keep quiet about the magnet error. Said it make the museum look negligent. Did he pay you for your silence? He laughed bitterly. You think I'd be living like this if he had? I studied him. He wasn't lying, at least not entirely. His pulse beat quick but steady, his hands restless but not defensive. He'd done something wrong, but not fatal. I asked, what about the van?
The museum van that shouldn't have been there Sunday morning, parked by the old payphone across the street. His eyes darted up. That van was off the books. Helston said it was for delivery to the restoration lab. He had a key to everything, including the van lockbox. You think I was going to stop the man who signed my paycheck? No, I said, but you might have noticed who drove it. Russo hesitated. Tall guy, dark jacket. Thought it was Helston's nephew. He helped with events sometimes, but I didn't get close. Would you recognize him again? He gave a short, humorless smile. I recognize guilt better than faces, Crowe. That night smelled of it. I slid an envelope across the table, a printout of the maintenance logs and a copy of his original statement. Read that. You said you clocked out at 11:30 Friday. Security cameras show you leaving closer to midnight. He frowned. I waited for Helston to finish locking up. He was still in Gallery 4, checking something near the vault door. I remember hearing him curse, said a bolt jammed. That door ever move after that night? Not till we replaced the floor years later. They said the base was uneven, so they reseated it. Why? Because I think that vault door was more than decor. I think it was storage, temporary storage, for something worth hiding. Russo's shoulders sagged. So that's what this is about. Money. It usually is. I stood, leaving the envelope on his table. If you remember anything else, anyone else who knew about that override, call me before someone else does. As I reached the door, he said quietly, You really think Helston killed her? I think she got in his way, and that's usually enough. Outside, the evening had sunk into a murky blue. I stopped by my car, opened my laptop, and connected to a remote forensic server. Pulling the old access records again, I cross-referenced prime stamps with building sensor logs. The system registered the magnetic interruption at 11:49 p.m., the same minute the photo placed Helston in the gallery.
12 minutes later, all sensors restored. The perfect window. Back at my office, the jazz turned low, and the rain kept time against the window. I played the enhanced 911 call again. The whisper came right before the operator's question. That single word. Sorry. Russo said he'd arrived later. The guard, Potty, said he found her alone. But someone made that call 8 minutes before the body was discovered. Someone who already knew she was dead. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Daughter's Grudge. Some people inherit money. Others inherit silence. Erin Keller had learned to live with both kinds. Her house sat at the edge of a subdivision north of the city. Clipped lawns, cars washed twice a week, mailboxes that still mattered. She answered the door barefoot, her eyes narrowing when I said her mother's name. "Is this about that museum again?" she asked. "You people called it a heart attack 20 years ago. What's left to pick at?" "Mostly the truth," I said. She crossed her arms, leaning against the frame. "My mother was obsessed with that place. When she retired, she spent more time with coins than with people. Maybe that's why her heart gave out." "Maybe," I said. "But she filed a complaint the week before she died, said there was improper access to donor records. Did she ever mention that to you?" Erin blinked. "Complaint? No. She didn't tell me much near the end. We argued." "What about?" She hesitated. "She thought I should volunteer too. Give something back," she said. I told her I'd rather give to a living cause. That was our last fight. She died 2 days later. You can stop looking for poetry in that. I nodded. "Did she ever seem frightened?" Erin's eyes flicked past me toward a framed photo on the hallway table. Her mother, smiling stiffly at a museum gala, the vault door gleaming behind her. "Maybe," she said quietly. "There was one call, Friday night before she died. Late. She sounded distracted, asked if I still had her spare house key. I said yes. Then she said, 'Never mind, don't worry about it,' and hung up. Do you still have that key?" She frowned. "I threw it away years ago." "Do you remember anything else she said that week?" "She mentioned someone at the museum was too interested in numbers. I thought she meant donations. She'd worked in a bank her whole life. She noticed when money didn't add up." "Anyone specific?" "No, but she said, 'I'll take it to Naomi if I have to.' That's the new director, right?" "Wasn't at the time. So she meant Helston." She shrugged, uneasy. "If she caught him skimming, good for her. But if you're here to make me grieve all over again, don't. I'm here to make sure she didn't die for doing the right thing." That got through. The defensive set of her jaw softened. "You really think someone killed her?" "I think someone wanted her quiet, and your mother didn't go quietly about anything." She almost smiled at that. "No, she didn't." Before I left, I asked if I could take a look at her mother's belongings. Erin disappeared into the garage and returned with a small banker's box. Inside were faded volunteer badges, a museum brochure, and a notebook labeled Docent Notes Gallery 4. The last entry stopped me. Saturday, May 8th, told Avery not to touch ledger until audit. He smiled like I'd handed him a weapon.
I photographed the page. On my way out, Erin called after me. "Detective, if you find out she was right, tell me. She spent her whole life trying to be honest. Maybe it finally mattered." Back in my car, I sat for a long minute. Honesty was a dangerous hobby in places that measured virtue in endowments. At my office, I scanned Marion's notebook and ran her last few emails through a sentiment analysis program, not for emotion, but for changes in syntax. Stress leaves fingerprints in language. Her last message to Helston read, "Avery, we need to talk Monday. There's an entry in the ledger that doesn't belong."
The metadata showed she sent it at 10:42 p.m. Friday, an hour before he moved the vault door. I called Ruiz. The daughters got a note, and her mother warned Helston before she died. She confronted him about the ledger. Ledger meaning donation record? Ruiz asked. Or a front for one. Marion was a banker. She'd know cooked numbers when she saw them. Ruiz sighed. So she caught him, called him out, and the next day she's dead in his gallery. You think he staged it? Maybe. Or maybe she died naturally, and he made sure it looked that way before calling it in. The whisper on the 911 call? Ruiz said. Could have been him. Could have been anyone with guilt, I said. I closed the notebook. On its back cover was a post-it. File copies in basement. Old donation ledgers. Gallery 4. I smiled faintly. Even the dead leave breadcrumbs, if you read between the lines. Tomorrow, I'd go back to the museum's basement. The past doesn't rot down there. It waits. End of Chapter 4.
Chapter 5. Coins, Donors, Motive. The Whitlocks' basement was a contradiction in architecture. Concrete walls, stainless shelving, humidity control systems worth more than most houses. Museums love to pretend they're about preservation. What they're really about is control. Dr. Naomi Price met me there, arms crossed, expression guarded. You again? I thought you'd finished poking around our ghosts. I'm still counting them, I said. Marion Keller's docent notes mentioned donation ledgers stored down here. You have them? Her jaw tightened. Those are archival records, sensitive. So's a 21-year-old corpse. That earned me a slow exhale and a reluctant keycard swipe. 5 minutes, she said. The shelves stretched like alleys of paper ghosts. I scanned spines until I found the one Marion meant. Donor records 2003-2005. Inside, neat columns of handwriting, black ink fading to gray. The pages smelled of dust and old ink, the scent of deferred accountability. I flipped to May 2004. The line item jumped out. Donation, 1870 Liberty Head, private acquisition, value, $310,000. Source, Helston Charitable Trust. But in the margin, Marion had written, coin not yet delivered, entry premature. The word premature was underlined twice. I photographed the page, then the next. Beneath, a correction note dated 2 weeks later. Delivery confirmed via Russo. Vault transfer complete. Russo, the same guard who swore he'd never touched the vault after that night. Dr. Price hovered nearby. You shouldn't be photographing those, she said. Then you shouldn't have written over evidence, I said. She frowned. Excuse me? The handwriting changes after the correction. Someone added that line after Marion died. I can prove it with forensic handwriting software. She hesitated. I wasn't here then.
But you worked under Helston later, I said. You must know how he handled acquisitions. Her gaze flicked to the camera above us. He liked impressive numbers, the kind that brought new donors. Numbers like a 6-figure coin that didn't exist yet? She said nothing, but silence often answers louder than words. I closed the ledger. You replaced the floors in Gallery 4 in 2012, right? Yes. Anything under them? Old wiring, maybe. The vault door needed releveling. And you didn't find anything unusual? I didn't dig for ghosts, Mr. Crowe. I pocketed my phone.
Maybe you should have. On the way out, I stopped by the vault door again. Tourists milled above. None noticed me tracing the faint groove around the door's base. Barely visible, but it ran deeper toward one side, as if something heavy had been slid, then shifted back. At my office that night, I loaded the ledger images into a database for handwriting analysis. The system matched Marion's notes in the margins with 97% certainty until the delivery confirmed line. That one scored 42%, too low to match her, too neat to be hers. I pulled the donor filings from public tax records. The Helston Charitable Trust had declared the Liberty Head donation as delivered on May 9, 2004, one day after Marion's death. Coin delivered, donor praised, tax deduction processed. Perfect timing. Ruiz called as I was pouring another coffee. "I tracked the 1870 Liberty Head," he said. "It's in a private collection in Tampa, bought at an estate auction in 2006. Helston's? His brother-in-law's." There it was. The motive minted and gleaming. I said, "Find out who transported it. If Russo's name pops up, we're halfway there." I stared at the vault door photo on my wall. The word transfer from Helston's PDA note echoed back. Not a metaphor, a literal move. He'd used the gala as cover to slide a coin into the vault, logged it as a donation, and then quietly removed it after Marion was gone. A simple transaction dressed up as philanthropy. I opened Marion's lost email again. There's an entry in the ledger that doesn't belong. She'd caught him before the move, but not soon enough. The next morning, I returned to the museum before opening hours. The security guard, a new hire named Travis, let me in with a shrug. "Dr. Price said you're cleared. Don't touch the coins." Wouldn't dream of it. In Gallery 4, I crouched near the vault door's base and pressed a handheld magnetometer along the seam. It chirped faintly, residual metal beneath the floor. Probably part of the old hinge assembly. Or something else. I slid a thin inspection mirror under the edge. A glint of metal caught the light. Small, circular, like the edge of a coin. But not gold, bronze. When I pried it out, I realized it wasn't a coin at all. It was a key tag, tarnished and worn, stamped with one number. 4. The same as the gallery number. A spare vault key, or a marker for what used to be hidden there. Whatever it was, someone had left it behind, and someone else had made sure no one noticed. I pocketed the tag. A quiet transaction always leaves change. End of Chapter 5.
Chapter 6. The Ledger Nobody Read. The longer a case sits, the quieter it gets. Paper stops arguing with itself. Handwriting fades. Notes become decor. You have to wake it up the right way. I started with the old evidence box the unit had mailed over. Gray cardboard, hand-labeled Whitlock, 2004, Keller. Inside, statements, coroner's photos, an incident report that had yellowed at the corners, and a 1-inch thick packet of museum maintenance logs. Ruiz had scribbled on the front, "All reviewed, no value." No value. That phrase keeps me employed. I laid the pages out across my desk like a slow-motion crime scene. The museum's internal paperwork was its own kind of archaeology. Daily checklists, alarm resets, sign-outs for radios, lights, and tools. The police had scanned these once, probably yawned halfway through, and filed them as background noise.
That was 2004. Different eyes, different priorities. At the bottom of the stack sat the equipment cage ledger. Handwritten, carbon copy pages still clipped to their rusted spine. The top sheet was dated May 7, 2004, 2 days before Marion Keller died. In tidy museum penmanship. Lighting kit, A. Helston, director. Furniture sliders, 2. Pry bar, 1. Torch C12 chrome, reassigned to D. Potty, temp. Initialed MR, 2140 hours. Russo's initials. The supervisor, with gambling debt. The next entry came 2 days later. Torch C12 chrome, returned 0818 a.m. Signed D. Potty. Initialed MR. I read it twice. Potty wasn't scheduled until 10 that morning, and 0818 was before the 911 call, before he supposedly found the body. But there it was. His name wrapped around a time that shouldn't exist. The police had looked at this once, I knew, because Russo's old case summary mentioned it. Equipment log, checked. Nothing irregular. Of course it looked clean. A borrowed flashlight returned, end of story. When a death reads natural and a ledger reads tidy, nobody asks why the ink sits heavier on one line than the others. I held the page under a lamp. The D in D. Potty cut deeper than the rest, like someone pressing too hard on unfamiliar letters. The strokes were tight, deliberate. I pulled Potty's 2004 HR form from the folder. His signature there looped lazily, confident. 2 different hands pretending to be one. Maybe Russo had written him back into the morning. Maybe Helston told him to. Either way, the light had come home early on paper only.
I ran my finger along the column of times. 2140, 0818. 10 hours unaccounted for. A torch issued Friday night, reappearing Sunday morning before dawn, its borrower supposedly asleep at home. If this were theft, that missing window would be motive enough. In a death, it was choreography. Ruiz called while I was still staring at the sheet. "You sound buried," he said. "Digging," I answered. "You remember the flashlight entry your team logged in 2004? He laughed softly. "Barely. We checked it, looked routine. It wasn't. Party's return signature is forged." A pause. "You're sure?" I'm staring at the ink. Same pen, same pressure, same initials as Russo's. He wrote Party back into the story before the cops ever saw it. "You think Helston told him to clean the log?" "I think Helston told everyone to clean something. The man ran a museum. He understood curation." I photographed the page, then the carbon copy beneath it. The lower sheet carried faint transfer marks, no pressure where the forged signature sat. Whoever faked it had written only on the top page, not through the pad. Sloppy perfection. Next came a note, 2 lines above the Monday entries. C12 torch replaced. New unit 73A. Old corroded. Dispose. Convenient corrosion. The model number mattered. Museums track consumables. I checked the procurement register. The torch issued to Party had serial 68F. The one replaced afterward was 73A, different item entirely, meaning the first light, the real one, was still missing, or hiding in plain sight. I sat back, the pieces aligning. A director staging a demo, a supervisor signing out heavy tools and a flashlight, a temp guard supposedly arriving late but returning equipment early, a volunteer dead in the middle. Ruiz said, "So we've got forgery, missing equipment, and a dead docent. Still not murder." "No, just proof someone rewrote time. That's worse." Outside, the rain had started again. The city hummed the same note it had 21 years ago. I packed the copies into a folder and wrote across the tab, C12 Chrome, Party, Forged. Some cases break with DNA. This one was going to break with ink. Next stop, Florida. Not for the sunshine, just for the man whose signature survived it. End of Chapter 6.
Chapter 7. The Van That Wasn't There. American sunlight has a way of forgiving the wrong people. Everything looks cleaner under it, especially the kind of guilt that hides behind steady work and a different name. I found Daniel Poddy behind the security desk of a marina office on Clearwater Bay, the badge on his shirt reading Dan Patel. The face had aged 20 years, but the eyes still moved like a man counting exits. "Mr. Patel, or do you still answer to Poddy?" His smile faltered. "Depends who's asking." "Someone who knows your handwriting," I said, laying a copycat of the equipment ledger on the counter. The fluorescent light above us hummed like an anxious thought. He stared at the page without touching it. "That's old." "Older than your new name," I said. "You signed out a C12 Chrome torch on May 7, 2004. Then you returned it at 8:18 a.m. on the 9th. The thing is, you weren't scheduled until 10. You also didn't write that line." Poddy's fingers twitched once on the countertop, then flattened. "You can't prove that." "I already did," I said. "Pressure marks don't lie. The pen that wrote your name pressed harder than your own hand ever did, and it used the same ink as Russo's initials." His jaw worked. No words at first. Then, "Russo said it'd keep the report clean. That's one word for it." He looked past me, toward the boats in the sun, as if the water could drown the years between us. "I didn't kill her," he said finally. "I didn't even see her. He told me to come early and wait outside until the power crew arrived." "Helston told you that?" Poddy nodded. "He said the alarms were down, something about the vault door display needing a last-minute adjustment. I came in before dawn, used the flashlight, waited in the hall. When I went to check the gallery, she was already like that." His voice thinned. "He said he'd call it in, then changed his mind." "You made the 911 call." His eyes snapped to mine. "How?" "I listened to the tape. You said sorry. You were standing across the street. You waited 2 minutes too long."
He sank under the stool, head in his hands. "He told me to call from the payphone, said it would look better if it came from a bystander. I didn't even understand what that meant. He said donors scare easy. And Russo? He came later. Helston told him to make the paperwork match, write the light back in, sign the morning line. That simple?" Poddy's laugh was hollow. "Nothing was simple back then. You didn't say no to a man who paid the bills for half the city." "Except Marion Keller did," I said. He winced. "She was supposed to leave early Friday. She stayed to help with the demo. I saw her carrying a folder. Looked like numbers, donation lists. They argued about it. I heard her voice through the door saying something like, 'You can't fix this with a stamp.' Then she left. And you came in Sunday to make it all look tidy." He shook his head. "No, he did. He told me to unlock the side door, said he'd handle the rest. When I came back from the payphone, he was sitting near her, pretending to check her pulse." "You stayed?" "For a minute," he said quietly. "Then I left before the cops came." "Why?" "He told me not to say I'd seen her alive. Said the insurance people would blame me for delay. He said he'd file the incident report himself. Next thing I knew, Russo was on the line, saying I'd done everything right." "You ever wonder why your signature came back on that flashlight entry?" "I tried not to," he said. Helston sent a check for 2 months' pay and told me to look for work out of state. Said he'd keep my record clean. He even wrote me a letter of reference. Where's that letter? He hesitated, then pulled a folded page from the drawer beside the monitor. The paper had museum letterhead and Helston's familiar, elegant hand. Mr. Potty provided reliable service during his tenure and demonstrated discretion under pressure. Discretion, I said. A beautiful euphemism for silence. Potty rubbed his temples. You think I wanted this to follow me? I didn't even keep the torch. I left it in the office. Someone found it, I said, or pretended to. He looked up sharply. You're going after him, aren't you? I'm going to finish what your signature started. I took the letter, folded it beside the photocopy, and left him staring at the boats that never moved. Back at the rental car, I called Ruiz. Potty talked. Voluntarily? Gult is better warrant than paper, I said. He admits Helston told him to call from across the street. Russo cleaned the logs. Same fingerprints on both lies. What about the torch? Gone, probably buried with the truth under a flooring contract. Enough to reopen? Ruiz asked. Not yet, but close. I started the engine. The marina shimmered in the rearview mirror, quiet, almost innocent. Next step? Ruiz asked. Find where that missing torch ended up, and who signed for its replacement. As I drove north, the sunlight bounced off the windshield, bright and blinding, like the reflection of something small and metal that had once lit a dark room and then disappeared when it wasn't supposed to.
End of Chapter 7. Her eyes widened. How? Because you're an archivist, I said. You don't delete history, you misfile it. She hesitated, then opened a lower drawer and lifted out a thin brown envelope. I found this years ago when we digitized the 2004 collection. I should have destroyed it. Inside were 2 Polaroids, low-light shots of Gallery 4 taken during the Friday gala setup. One showed the vault door partly open, the glare of a flashlight on its steel rim. The other captured the same light haloed on the floor, smoke haze faint in the beam. I felt the air shift. Who took these? Maintenance, she said. Helston asked them to test the camera lighting before guests arrived. I only kept copies because the negatives went missing. Ruiz, listening on speaker, let out a low whistle. That haze could be dust. Or burnt synthetic fiber, I said. We'll know after lab enhancement. Price whispered, Do you think she suffered? Less than he should, I said. I slipped the photos back into the envelope. You're going to give me a formal statement. It's not a confession, it's a correction. She nodded, tears unstirred but visible. If I'd spoken sooner. You'd have been unemployed, he'd still have buried it. I left her staring at the vault door through the glass partition, the same door that made donors smile and one woman die. Outside, drizzle traced the marble steps. I called Ruiz again. We've got photos, a forged log, and a living witness. Enough to move? Not yet, but now the story bleeds. The rain thickened, flattening reflections into one slick sheet of gray. In it, the museum's lights flickered like warning signals from a patient who wasn't quite dead. Some truths die in the dark. Others wait for a spark. End of Chapter 8. We sat in silence for a while, the hum of the old fluorescent tubes filling the gaps where faith should have been. Then Ruiz said, "We can't prove that with smoke on a 20-year-old form." "No," I agreed, "but we can prove the cover-up. The item wasn't scrapped, it was re-registered." I pulled up the next year's audit.
There it was. Torch Unit 68F, renumbered 73A, reassigned to lighting kit inventory. Same item, new name, same ghost, new mask. Helston re-tagged the murder weapon, I said softly. Ruiz sat back, and Price signed the fake disposal. You think she knew? I said, she knew enough to be afraid. She kept the museum alive by pretending nothing inside it was dead. He looked at me. You'll talk to her again. I said, tonight. Dr. Naomi Price's office smelled of disinfectant and expensive nerves. The museum had closed an hour earlier, but her light was still on. When I knocked, she didn't look surprised. I wondered when you'd be back, she said. I laid the printout of the disposal slip on her desk. You signed this. Her expression didn't change. That's a maintenance record. I said, it's a forgery. You weren't registrar yet. Helston had you ghost sign it. The torch wasn't corroded. It was re-tagged. She exhaled slowly. I was told to clear it from the log. He said it was for insurance. Routine equipment consolidation, he called it. You knew he was lying. I knew he was afraid. And I'd seen what happened to people who argued with him. Russo was demoted. Padhi vanished. The board adored Helston. I was a temp archivist with student loans. So you signed? I said. Yes, she whispered, and I never stopped regretting it. I studied her face. Fear ages slower than guilt, but it runs deeper. You kept copies.
End of Chapter 7.
Chapter 8. The Torch That Never Burned Out. Some evidence rots quietly in basements. Other pieces travel, hiding in inventories no one checks because they were resolved. I've learned to follow the paperwork the way other people follow scent. It lingers. Back in the city, Ruiz met me at the archive unit. Same dusty corner room where cold cases go to nap. He had a thermos of coffee and the look of a man who'd finally stopped dismissing coincidence. You said the torch was replaced after the death? He began. Entry says so. But procurement logs don't lie. They just get lazy. If Helston filed the disposal, it went through maintenance. He rolled his chair toward the evidence locker computer, tapping through folders that hadn't seen daylight since dial-up. After a minute, he whistled. Here. Disposal report. June 2004. Torch C12 chrome. Serials 68F. Corrosion at socket. Scrapped per supervisor approval. Signed by... He paused. N. Price. Naomi Price? Same. She was assistant registrar back then. I stared at the screen. She told me she joined after Marion died. She did, officially. Unofficially, it looks like she was already handling records for Helston. I leaned over his shoulder. Any attachments? Yeah. One JPEG scan, probably the disposal slip. He opened it. The scanned paper was faint but legible. Item rendered inoperable. Housing cracked. Contained residual oxidized material consistent with heat damage. A flashlight that overheated during a power outage? Unlikely. Museums don't do field work. They walk light and quiet. I zoomed in on the lower margin. Someone had written a short note in pencil. Smell of smoke. Gallery 4? Why would a corroded torch smell like smoke? I asked. Ruiz shrugged. Shorted battery? Or burned fabric? I said. Marion's blouse was synthetic. The coroner marked no scorch, but he only examined the front. She was sitting upright when they found her. If the flash housing brushed her back, Ruiz grimaced. You think he used the torch to, startle her?
Not on purpose. Maybe he waved it, dropped it, maybe she tried to grab it. Enough current to jolt, enough fear to stop a heart already unstable.
We sat in silence for a while, the hum of the old fluorescent tubes filling the gaps where faith should have been. Then Ruiz said, "We can't prove that with smoke on a 20-year-old form." "No," I agreed, "but we can prove the cover-up. The item wasn't scrapped, it was re-registered." I pulled up the next year's audit. There it was, Torch Unit 68F, renumbered 73A, reassigned to lighting kit inventory. Same item, new name, same ghost, new mask. "Helston re-tagged the murder weapon," I said softly. Ruiz sat back. "And Price signed the fake disposal. You think she knew?" I said, "She knew enough to be afraid. She kept the museum alive by pretending nothing inside it was dead." He looked at me. "You'll talk to her again." I said, "Tonight." Dr. Naomi Price's office smelled of disinfectant and expensive nerves. The museum had closed an hour earlier, but her light was still on. When I knocked, she didn't look surprised. "I wondered when you'd be back," she said. I laid the printout of the disposal slip on her desk. "You signed this." Her expression didn't change. "That's a maintenance record." I said, "It's a forgery. You weren't registrar yet. Helston had you ghost sign it. The torch wasn't corroded, it was re-tagged." She exhaled slowly. "I was told to clear it from the log. He said it was for insurance. Routine equipment consolidation, he called it. You knew he was lying." I knew he was afraid. And I'd seen what happened to people who argued with him. Russo was demoted. Padhi vanished. The board adored Helston. I was a temp archivist with student loans. "So you signed?" I said. "Yes," she whispered, "and I never stopped regretting it." I studied her face. Fear ages slower than guilt, but it runs deeper. "You kept copies."
Her eyes widened.
"How?"
"Because you're an archivist," I said. "You don't delete history, you misfile it." She hesitated, then opened a lower drawer and lifted out a thin brown envelope. "I found this years ago, when we digitized the 2004 collection. I should have destroyed it." Inside were 2 Polaroids, low-light shots of Gallery 4 taken during the Friday gala setup. One showed the vault door partly open, the glare of a flashlight on its steel rim. The other captured the same light haloed on the floor, smoke haze faint in the beam. I felt the air shift. "Who took these?" "Maintenance," she said. "Helston asked them to test the camera lighting before guests arrived. I only kept copies because the negatives went missing." Ruiz, listening on speaker, let out a low whistle. "That haze could be dust. Or burnt synthetic fiber," I said. "We'll know after lab enhancement." Price whispered, "Do you think she suffered?" "Less than he should," I said. I slipped the photos back into the envelope. "You're going to give me a formal statement. It's not a confession, it's a correction." She nodded, tears unstirred but visible. "If I'd spoken sooner." "You'd have been unemployed, he'd still have buried it." I left her staring at the vault door through the glass partition, the same door that made donors smile and one woman die. Outside, drizzle traced the marble steps. I called Ruiz again. "We've got photos, a forged log, and a living witness." "Enough to move?" "Not yet, but now the story bleeds." The rain thickened,
flattening reflections into one slick sheet of gray. In it, the museum's lights flickered like warning signals from a patient who wasn't quite dead. Some truths die in the dark. Others wait for a spark. End of Chapter 8.
Chapter 9. What Marion Saw. By the time dawn climbed the blinds of my office, the photos from Naomi Price's envelope sat under a digital magnifier, their haze sharpened, their silence almost articulate. The smoke wasn't dust. Lab imaging confirmed trace fiber melt consistent with polyester, synthetic clothing. Marion's blouse. Ruiz called as soon as the report hit his inbox. So the torch was the trigger. I said literally. It didn't kill her by force, it startled her into it. But Helston knew it, and that's enough. She saw him steal. He saw him stage. He moved the coin into the vault, logged it as a donation, and told donors it was locked safe. Marion saw the ledger, saw the lie, and went to confront him. The torch shorted, she collapsed. He waited, then rewrote the night. And everyone else just played along? Fear does that. Fear and payroll. Ruiz and I met at the museum just after opening. Gallery 4 looked smaller in morning light, the vault door dull and harmless. You'd never guess it had once framed a lie worth 300 grand. Ruiz crossed his arms. You sure we'll find anything left? I said, depends on how thorough he was. Helston liked showmanship more than caution. Dr. Price met us with her keycard and a pale resolve. The board doesn't know you're here. I promised they will. We rolled the vault door forward on its sliders, the same ones Helston had borrowed 2 decades earlier. Under the base, my magnetometer chirped faintly, a metallic echo beneath the wood. Ruiz pried up one board. A hollow cavity yawned beneath, maybe 8 inches deep. Inside lay a corroded flashlight wrapped in brittle cloth. Its chrome casing was split at the seam, the brand tag still legible, C12 Chrome, serial 68F. Hello, old friend, Ruiz muttered. We bagged it, labeled it, and sent photos to the lab before even brushing off the dust. The vault wheel loomed above like a blind eye finally opening. Price whispered, did he hide it here the whole time? I said, he built this room for the illusion of security. Why not use it? I turned the flashlight gently. The cloth beneath it crumbled to reveal another shape, a small, flat notebook sealed in plastic. I peeled it open carefully. Inside, written in Marion's steady pen, ledger note discrepancy confirmed, entry before arrival. A.H. insisted no audit necessary, keeping records separate until verified. If anything happens, tell Naomi to check under the vault base. M.K. Price covered her mouth. She left that for me. I said, she trusted you. She just didn't know who was listening.
By afternoon, the lab sent word. Residue inside the flashlight showed melted fibers matching Marion's clothing and carbon scoring from a shorted battery. It had discharged hard enough to burn through casing metal. Small spark, big consequence. Ruiz paced the hallway outside the museum office, phone pressed tight to his ear. I just got off with Florida PD. They served the warrant at Helston's villa. And? Gone. House cleared last week. Bank accounts moved to offshore branches. He's been planning his exit. I wasn't surprised. Men like Helston rehearse their escapes before they start their crimes. Price sat at her desk, the notebook open before her like confession paper. What happens now? Now we file everything you've given us. The ledger, the forged log, the disposal slip, the flashlight, the photos, all of it. The DA will petition to reclassify Marion Keller's death as negligent homicide. Price's voice broke. Will that matter after 20 years? It will to her daughter, I said. I handed her a copy of Marion's final note.
You'll tell the board. Let them decide whether their patron saint was a thief or a coward." When we stepped out into the courtyard, the air felt lighter, though the sky was the same gray it had always been. Ruiz turned to me. "You think we'll ever find him?" "Men like that don't run forever. They just keep flying in smaller circles until they vanish." "Then this isn't finished." "No," I said, "but the truth finally is." We walked toward the street. Across from the museum, the old payphone's ghost still marked the concrete. I stopped a moment, watching a bus hiss to a halt nearby. Passengers stepped off, none of them looking up. For a second, I saw the reflection of a man in a dark jacket, standing there 20 years too late, still holding a phone. I blinked, and he was gone. Some cases end with an arrest. Some end with a silence that finally makes sense. Marion Keller didn't die for greed or chance. She died for seeing what was not supposed to be seen. And now someone else would have to live with that. End of Chapter 9.
Chapter 10. The Quiet Confession. It took 3 weeks for the lab to finish what the museum had ignored for 2 decades. The final report arrived on a gray morning that smelled like rain and coffee. Ruiz and I sat at my office table, 2 cups, 1 file, and the sound of traffic humming like old static. He flipped the folder open. Battery leak confirmed, polyester burn, and traces of latex near the switch. Someone wore gloves. I said, "Helston." He handled the torch, probably tried to move it after the short. Ruiz said, "Would have left his prints otherwise." He rubbed his forehead. "DA's filing for negligent homicide, fraud, and obstruction. Florida's already flagged his accounts. They'll catch him eventually." "Eventually," I repeated. The words sat between us like something borrowed too long. I turned back to the evidence board. The vault door photo, the ledger scans, Marion's final note. So many truths had lived in plain sight. All it took was one woman who refused to let the numbers lie. "Her daughter know yet?" I asked. Ruiz said, "Erin got the call this morning. She cried, then she asked if it would be public." I said, "It will. People donate to stories more than to truth. Time they learned this one." He looked up. "You ever get used to this part?" "No," I said. "You just get quieter about it." That afternoon, I walked through the museum one last time. Gallery 4 had been closed for renovation, officially to modernize the exhibit. In reality, they were exorcising a ghost. Workers moved glass cases, polished metal, and sealed the floor where we'd pried up the vault base. Dr. Price stood by the doorway, clipboard in hand. She said, "They're retiring the vault door. Too much baggage," they said. I said, "Maybe they should leave it. Remind people what heavy things look like." She managed a tired smile. "For what it's worth, thank you." I said, "Don't thank me. You're the one who kept the paper trail alive." As I turned to leave, she added, "We're creating a small plaque for Marion in the docent hall. The board approved it unanimously." I nodded. She'd hate the attention. "Yes," Price said, "but she'd love the accuracy." Back at my office, I poured the last of the coffee and let the quiet fill the room. Outside, the city had moved on. People commuting, museums opening, donors planning new galas. I thought about Helston somewhere across the ocean, maybe walking another marble hallway, maybe pretending he'd never heard the name Marion Keller. But guilt is a slow companion. It rides along, whispers in reflective glass, and waits until silence feels like a sentence. I picked up Marion's notebook again, running a thumb over her handwriting. On the last page she'd left blank, a faint indentation pressed through from the sheet before it. Under sidelight, the outline read, "Keep faith, even in numbers." For a woman who spent her life balancing ledgers, it was the closest thing to grace.
I closed the book and looked at the vault photo one last time. The steel wheel gleamed faintly in the desk lamp's reflection, like a coin flipping through the dark. Some cases close themselves. Others just stop asking to be reopened. I shut off the light, left the office door unlocked, and stepped into the night. The rain had started again, soft, persistent, washing the museum's windows clean enough to see my own reflection. For once, it didn't look like loss. Marion Keller had been right. Helston had been wrong. And the vault, finally, was empty. End of chapter 10.
Thanks for listening. If you want more, subscribe and come back soon.